Blair, thank you so much for joining us today on The Voice of America. It's always a pleasure to see you, sir.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, after 10 years, of course, as British Prime Minister, you became the official envoy of the Quartet on the Middle East, and along with U.S. envoy George Mitchell, have been trying to get the Israelis and Palestinians into peace talks. The Quartet, representing the United States, the United Nations, the European Union, and Russia, recently issued a statement calling on Israel to freeze settlement activity and condemn the nation's plan to build 1,600 new homes in East Jerusalem. Why is this plan and Jewish settlements in general so toxic to the peace process?
The worry that the Palestinians have is that if settlement expansion continues, then the danger is when you come to negotiate your state, you find that the reality on the ground has shifted against the possibility of such a state coming into being. And so the idea, if you like, is to try and get people to freeze the situation now so that we can then negotiate in proper time the borders of the state and ensure that nothing comes between us and getting that endeavour done. Now, you know, settlements has been a raw and difficult issue for many years. I think the single most important thing, however, is if we get into the negotiation about the borders of the state, that resolves the settlement question too.
So does Israel need to freeze the settlements in order for the negotiations to move forward in a positive way?
Well, it's given now an undertaking, the freeze effectively, on settlement development outside of Jerusalem. Obviously, there's still concerns about what happens inside Jerusalem. I think what I would say is this. The essential thing is for people not to do anything that inhibits or obstructs or hinders our attempt to get the parties round the table, talking, negotiating, and reaching a deal.
And when you say hinders, what sort of activity are you speaking of?
I think anything that causes the other side to lose faith in the other's willingness to negotiate is a problem. I mean, that's why there's been this debate about settlements. The Palestinians, for example, have also got to make sure that they continue to take action on security, that they don't engage in any action that could lead the Israelis to think they were anyone was inciting violence in any way. So there are things that both sides need to do. But my view very simply of this is get the negotiations going, get them underway, and then carry on with this patient, rather below the radar, ground up exercise of trying to build the institutions of statehood, the economy, the development of the West Bank and the Palestinian territory.
I want to ask you about that in a moment, but should Hamas, which controls the Gaza Strip, be part of the negotiations?
It's very hard to make Hamas part of the negotiation for a two-state solution, which is what we want, if they don't accept the existence of Israel. And that's the problem. And particularly when they're still prepared to use violence to further the negotiation. I think this is a negotiation where you can really only have a negotiation between parties that are committed to a peaceful resolution of the issues.
Soon after September 11th, 2001, the terrorist attacks on the United States, I was sitting in the backyard of then Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's residence in Jerusalem, and the two of you were holding a press conference. And I'll never forget what you said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you said if any good is ever to come out of that terrible day, September 11th, then maybe it will shock the status quo in such a way that there might be peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Now, unfortunately, here we are 9 years later, and that obviously is not the case, and they're not talking to each other at the moment, and yet you still remain optimistic. Why?
Because I think in the work that I've done the last 3 years, I can see a way through. And that way is to accept that what happened after the year 2000, when you had the Intifada, thousands died, the uprising, the breakdown of the peace negotiation that was conducted by President Clinton. You then had the withdrawal from Gaza, which Prime Minister Sharon undertook. According to the Israeli eyes, what happened is they got out of Gaza, they took their settlers with them, and then they got rockets and violence. So you have to rebuild confidence in this process. And the way of doing that is to understand what the issue is. The issue for the Israelis is security. It's as simple as that. They need to know a Palestinian state will be securely governed. The issue for the Palestinians is, if we take the measures on security, will you, the Israelis, get out and lift the occupation and let us govern our state? And that's why this idea of putting together action by the Palestinians on security, a response from the Israelis on lifting checkpoints, access and movement, giving greater permissions for the Palestinians to be free. This is, in my view, the bottom-up approach which can boost and support the political negotiation.
How does your personal faith your religion, your feelings towards Jerusalem impact your dedication to trying to bring peace to the Holy Land?
I think if you are a person of faith, of the Abrahamic faith, whether you're Jew, a Christian, a Muslim, being in and around Jerusalem and in the Holy Land is just an immensely special experience. That's why people sometimes say to me, well, you can't really enjoy being out there, surely, with all the challenge and the difficulty. And in fact, I do. And for me, the names that I read as a child in the Bible, and where these exotic and strange sounding places, they're places I now visit, and it's rather wonderful. So yes, I think being someone of faith gives you a special interest, if you like.
You've been criticized for your close relationship with, while Prime Minister, to former U.S. President George W. Bush. Critics especially focused on your decision to go to war in Iraq. If you had known that Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction, would you have still supported the war?
I supported the war on the basis that he was a threat. And actually, I believe what has emerged since is that he was a threat. It is correct that contrary to the intelligence we had at the time, he had decided to put his weapons programs into abeyance. He had not abandoned his ambitions. If we had left him in place and he and his two sons were still running Iraq today, they would have had 10 years of oil money. The sanctions had crumbled effectively. They weren't going to inhibit him, and he retained the ambition, nuclear ambitions as well as chemical weapons ambitions. So my view is, and it was a very difficult decision at the time, it remains fraught and difficult, that we're better off with Iraq trying now to find its way to democracy than with Saddam and his sons still in power.
With the recent elections in Iraq, now the parties face the challenge of forming a government. And the last time we had an election there, it took about 5 months and there was tremendous violence. Are you concerned about violence following the current elections in Iraq? I
think everybody understands it's really fragile. And, I don't visit there as I did when I was Prime Minister, but talking to people who do, there is also within the Iraqi people now a sense, I think, of what their future could be. And the truth is, if they carry on stabilizing the country, if the democratic and governmental process deepens and strengthens, Iraq's got an extraordinary and bright future.
And what lessons have we learned from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Well, I think there are many, many lessons, obviously, to do with the way we conduct operations like this. But I think there is one big lesson that we have to learn, which is that the nature of this modern extremism, because that's why it became difficult in Iraq, for the same reason it's difficult in Afghanistan, requires us to make a sustained effort over a period of time. And we have to be prepared, I'm afraid, to be in there for the long haul and to be prepared to stand up both for our values but also show our determination that those who use terror and car bombs and suicide bombs should not get their way.
And finally, it's been reported that your memoirs, called The Journey, will be published later this year. If that's true, could you please give us just a brief preview of the book and the main lessons you have learned in your lifetime so far?
I think the book is written slightly different, really, from a normal political autobiography. It's as much about what it's like to be a human being in these situations than, on such and such a date I met the following 6 people type of thing. And the second thing is really just how you, over time, have to learn that you cannot please everybody all of the time, but you should try to take the decisions in the end that you think are right, and that is, in the end, the only way to be a leader of a country.
Mr. Blair, thank you so much for joining us on The Voice of America.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.